Hey YouTube, I'm Kenneth Ryan.
I'm Linz Reesop.
And we're back with another exciting episode of Fanfiction Friday. Today we're taking a slight break from Clockwork, and instead we are reading a fic called Crooked Smiles by James _P _Sullivan. The lovely summary to this is, I got very high and decided, why not write my first porno? So here's 3,500 words of pure smut of my OTP/confetti. Except, is the confetti supposed to be like a confetti, right?
It might be the pairing name. I have no idea. Probably not. Because black and purple.
I have no idea.
But
we haven't decided who we want to be.
how do you pronounce? Is it V or Vio?
Violet is the
Vio,
color,
then.
so it should be Vio.
I'll be that one.
Okay, then should I start, I guess?
Sure.
Okay.
I like purple. It works.
Shadow attacked Vio's neck, pressing hot kisses and biting at the supple flesh. Oh, I don't like the word supple.
Or flesh.
Or flesh.
Supple
Vio
flesh.
giggled and writhed with pleasure, but this did nothing to stop Shadow's actions. Vio grasped at Shadow's arms, which were holding him tight against his chest, half wanting him to get on with it, other wanting to stay with Shadow, attached to his neck forever. A particularly harsh bite sent a shock that went straight to his dick.
Should I just do normal for this? Sure, there's only two characters. We'll just be mostly normal.
I'll make a voice as long as it's easy on my throat.
I'll just be normal.
Wow,
Ish.
lame. That's cool.
I can make it be all something.
By the way, excuse me, I'm sick. Fun fact.
Do it like
Yellow.
Jezebel.
Jezebel.
Just don't make the marks too big, Vio scolded. Shadow pressed a smile into the crook of the blonde's neck, making no movements to stop or slow down. Not that Vio was too upset about this. His neck was his Achilles heel, and Shadow had discovered this very early on into their relationship.
By the way, these two are really cute in the manga. I've read it. Oh, they're adorbs.
The instant Shadow's lips reached his collar, Vio became instant putty in his hands. They used instant twice in that sentence. Vio
They're high,
moaned,
apparently.
and grasped Shadow's violet locks while wrapping his leg. At least I didn't use whilst.
So happy whilst.
While wrapping his legs around the other's waist, trying to get some desperately needed friction.
Friction.
Shadow chuckled and finally released Vio from his slow torture, only to reach up and take a hold of both of Vio's wrists and hold them over his head. Light bondage?
Light bondage. That's a tag.
Shadow leaned back and admired his work. Beneath him, Vio lay breathing deeply, the deep blush painted across his face. His throat and shoulder were already blooming red and purple bruises, accompanied with bites littered across the smooth skin.
Oh my God.
It was cliché, and Shadow would never admit it, but he loved seeing the bright hickeys left on his lover's skin. It marked Vio as his and no one else's. Plus, it was oddly satisfying to watch him try to hide them and failing miserably. Feeling Vio shift impatiently under his grip snapped him out of his train of thought. He leaned in close and blew a soft breath over Vio's ear, making him shudder in anticipation for what was to come.
So, Shadow said,
I'm all like, oh, blah, blah, blah.
how do you want this?
Oh my god, why would you do that?
Vio drew a shaky breath and gave the figure looming over him a mischievous grin.
I want it as hard as you can give it. Shadow's expression darkened with desire. They hadn't been able to have a proper session for weeks. Sure, they'd been able to get together for quickies, but it always left them unsatisfied, hungry for more. This night was different, however. They had the entire house to themselves until the next morning, which meant the two of them could finally get some time to enjoy one another.
Ow.
Shadow wasted no time in kissing Vio hard and deep. Their teeth clacked against one another, and Shadow drew his tongue against the other's lip in apology. Vio instantly accepted and invited the hot, open-mouthed kiss with his own, melting into the other's touch. Vio was pretty sure that if he gave Shadow enough time, he could make him come without even touching his dick, but he wasn't about to find out. At least not today. Shadow was the first to pull away. Vio leaned forward to keep contact for as long as possible, until his shoulders protested under the taller man's grip. Shadow still had both of his hands locked in a vice above his head. Shadow gave a wink and pulled away, completely, and stepped off the bed and crouched down on the floor in front of the nightstand. That's an uncomfortable position. I'm like leaning weirdly. And then in front of the nightstand. Vio shuddered slightly at the sudden loss of Shadow's heat and kept a curious gaze set on him the entire time. Shadow turned his head towards Vio and flashed his fangs.
You're gonna like this.
He stood up.
Oh, wow,
Oh,
rude. He stood up and showed off what he had in his hands. A long black rope. Thin, but durable.
What are you going to do with that? Vio asked, playing the virgin.
Why don't you lean back and let me show you? By this time, Vio had risen onto his elbows and was watching Shadow intently, obviously excited for what he had planned. Shadow kneeled back onto the bed and straddled Vio's waist. Had a little thing in my throat. While pressing a steady hand to his chest, effectively pushing him flush against the bed. Vio helpfully held his hands out, while Shadow tied his wrists together.
Light bondage.
And then to the headboard. Whew, hot, sexy. Shadow embraced Vio and peppered his face with kisses. Peppered is another weird verb.
Why?
I don't know, it just sounds weird to me. I'm peppered. While the blonde giggled and tried to squirm out of his grasp. Shadow laughed and found Vio's mouth before kissing him long and slow. Vio hummed in appreciation of the affection and tilted his head so he could press closer into him. Shadow pulled back and rested his nose against Vio's cheekbone. Are the knots okay? Shadow asked, nuzzling Vio gently. Vio tugged at them, then clenched his fist, testing the circulation.
It's perfect, he smiled.
Good. Safe words, goat cheese. Vio blinked.
Goat cheese? Why goat cheese? A sour expression presented itself on Shadow's face.
Because it's disgusting. A sudden laugh burst out of Vio at his lover's words. I hate you, but I love you, but I hate you. Shadow waited patiently as Vio's laugh slowly melted into small chuckles. If anyone were to ask what his favorite, it must be another British person thing about the blonde was,
or like
he'd say his smile.
That's not English.
Vio was... Whatever. Vio was never one someone would label as emotional, and usually wore a scowl. As Red affectionately named it, Vio's resting bitch face. But when they were alone like this, his smile is the only thing in the room. His lips pull back into an uneven crescent, too high on one side, and a simple dimple tracing the centre of his left cheek. Every time he smiled, his crooked smile, name-dropping already. Shadow fell in love all over again. Connecting their lips once more, Shadow could feel his smile against his own.
What do you mean already? It's like a one-shot. It's only one chapter.
I know.
Anyways.
Shadow removed himself from Vio's waist and positioned the smaller male's legs so that Vio was half sitting on Shadow's lap, legs on either side of his hips. Slowly, Shadow pressed their crotches together. Crotch is another gross word. Moving in tortuously slow circles. Vio let out a low groan and dug his heels into the bed, desperate to get more of that delicious pressure his lover was tantalizing him with. Shadow eased the pressure of his hips, not wanting to give in to Vio's silent demands quite yet. What would be the point of the rope if he couldn't have a little fun with his prey first? Relax, Shadow cooed. Let me take care of you. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. Vio gave him a wary look, but relented nonetheless. He trusted Shadow with his entire life. He wasn't worried about what he had planned. It was sure to be amazing for both of them. Though their lovemaking sessions tended to be very rough to the point where it might be considered violent, it was very healthy. Everything they did was thoroughly discussed and researched beforehand. They never did anything unless the other was completely on board. Shadow had been thrilled to find out.
And he's talking about like consent and BDSM, healthy relationships.
Shadow had been thrilled to find out that Vio was a masochist and seemed to revel in pain. It meant that Shadow could show his dominance without being afraid of hurting Vio in a way that would frighten him. They could show their true selves to each other. This author is high and has worked out a perfect explanation for their behaviors.
This is adorable.
I appreciate you. James P. Sullivan underscores are in there.
It's one of the best kind of non-unintrusive, quick, like, consent.
Right? I really...
fan fiction we've had.
Oh my god, that's such a refreshing change from a lot of what we've read lately.
A lot of the fics we've read have been kind of dub-conny.
What's that mean?
Like, it's not, like, non-consensual sex, but it's really dubious.
True. Shadow began grinding their hips together in a rhythmic motion and trailed his hands down Vio's sides until they were resting on the smalls of his waist. In hindsight, Shadow realized he should have removed Vio's shirt before he tied his hands above his head, but he'd have to make do. Rubbing small circles into Vio's side, he brought his other hand up and clumsily tried to undo the buttons of Vio's nightshirt. The first few buttons popped with ease, but he soon had to enlist the help of his other hand to free the garment completely. Buttons. All Shadow could do was spread the shirt open to reveal Vio's chest. Shadow leaned down and pressed shallow bites onto the soft flesh of his stomach. Vio gasped and tensed slightly as Shadow made his way back up. He stopped to capture Vio's neck once more, this time digging his teeth hard into the skin of his shoulder. A surprised cry escaped Vio as he winced and grasped at nothing. He instantly regretted letting That was gross. He instantly regretted letting Shadow bind his hands. He wanted nothing more than to dig his fingernails into Shadow's hair and pull him closer. Shadow lapped at the wound he made, tasting the slightly metallic taste of blood mixed with sweat. Ugh. I'm not into that. That's real gross. Blood is not gross. Blood is gross.
Sweat is grosser.
That too.
Blood is kind of irony flavored.
I know, but it's still gross. The intoxicating combination drove Shadow wild with desire, and he had to focus on slowing himself down from fucking Vio into the mattress then and there. He wanted to make this good for his lover. Besides, there was plenty of time for that later that evening.
Shadow, please, Vio panted. Grinning against the blonde's shoulder, he ground his hips hard against him and was pleased to hear the pleasured sigh come from Vio.
What? He asked. Tell me what you want. Vio bit his lip and turned his head, obviously avoiding eye contact. It didn't matter how many times they did this, Vio was always embarrassed to ask for what he wanted. Luckily, Shadow found it endearing and loved reducing Vio into a begging mess, finally giving in to his demands.
Before finally giving in to his...
Thank you for catching my inability to read. Shadow gathered Vio into his arms and leaned into him, their bodies pressed tightly together. Shadow continued to roll his hips in a steady, unchanging motion, teasing himself as much as he was Vio. Tell me, do you want me to touch you? Do you want me to make you writhe and beg for mercy? Maybe you want me to suck you off, and then when it's almost too much, I can fuck you senseless. Until you can't even walk straight. Get it? 'Cause you're gay.
Whoops, they said here instead of here.
Yeah. By the way, that you can probably figure out when I'm ad-libbing, hopefully.
Yeah.
Shadow whispered into his ear, his breath sending goosebumps down Vio's arms. Vio's blush had intensified as he nodded. He wanted Shadow to use him for his own pleasure. Hold on. But not giving a damn about his comfort. Shadow sat up and removed his shirt, tossing it onto the floor behind him. Now it was Vio's turn to admire the view. This would be a good one for us to act out for. Shadow was someone who kept his body in good shape. Ah! That's not me. Not that Vio wasn't. Vio was shorter and trained more in long-distance running, while Shadow's tall, broad frame... broad, yeah, okay. Honey, I ain't that. Made him perfect for hand-to-hand combat. His abs were well-defined.
We could do like a...
Yeah, I'd have to, Sharpie that shit in. And Vio loved every second he got to drool over them. Vio wished he could run his hands along the tanned muscles hardened through the years of training. But all he could do was squirm within the vice. Finally moving forward, Shadow traced his fingers along the hem of Vio's boxers, testing the sensitive skin on his stomach. Vio drew in a quick breath when Shadow gently cupped the hardness trapped within the fabric. The puckered entrance concealed within. That's exactly what that made me think of. Throwback to episode poetic, 5.
Yeah.
Jinkies. Shadow lazily felt the entire length, through the boxers and began to gently stroke him. Vio's voice cracked as he let out a small whine in protest at the light touches.
Please, Shadow, I need you. I need to feel you. Vio moaned. Anyways, the words broke Shadow's resolve, and he captured Vio in a hasty kiss.
Sorry.
Tongues wrapping and intertwining with one another.
Dying.
Shadow released his
Didn't even make it
light
to the
grip
trash.
on Vio and hooked his fingers into his boxers and pulled them off completely. He paused for a second to admire Vio, legs spread just for him and exposed so intimately.
Goddesses, you're so fucking beautiful, Shadow admired. Vio scoffed and turned away, embarrassed by his words. He moaned loudly as Shadow took advantage over Vio being distracted to wrap a warm hand around the base of his dick and gave it a firm pump. Yeah, let's be honest, cold hands on dick, don't go there. It ain't fun. Little FYI from me to you. Stopping only to swipe his thumb over the sensitive underside of the head. He repeated his actions, timing his hand perfectly with Vio's breathing. The faster he drew his breaths, the faster he began to pump. Shadow enjoyed studying Vio's pleasured face. His eyes were shut, focusing on the hand on his dick with his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Shadow began to build speed, giving his wrist a bit of a rotation to get more friction in his grip. Vio moaned in appreciation and clenched his legs slightly around Shadow's waist to get closer. Shadow's hand moved in a perfect rhythm, pumping. Shadow's a fucking Mary Sue.
What?
Perfect rhythm, perfect with his breathing. Fuck you, no one's that good. Fuck you, Shadow.
What? It's not that hard to do with someone's breathing.
He's a Mary Sue. Pumping with varied pleasure, occasionally stopping to tease the slit. His dick was leaking pre-cum. I don't think there's supposed to be a space there.
I don't know.
Which Shadow used as a lubricant to make his hand slide a little easier across the delicate skin. Shadow could feel him twitching in his hand when he'd get a particularly good pump. Shadow stilled his hand so he had just his thumb and index finger wrapped around the base of Vio's dick. Cock ring! Vio tried to catch his breath and cracked his eyes open in time to see Shadow swipe his tongue across his over-sensitive head. A gasp caught in his throat as Shadow wrapped his mouth around the entire length and gently sucked at the hardness. Vio moaned and writhed his hips, trying to get more of that wet heat Shadow was providing.
Why that for a voice, I wonder.
Shadow writhed slightly before withdrew slightly before ducking his head and swallowing the whole length and sucking hard.
I should have done the breathing in, talking to oh, fuck, Shadow!
I did not like that.
Oh, fuck, Shadow! Vio moaned, burying his face into his arm. He clenched his thighs around his head, vaguely aware of any discomfort he might be causing the other through his pleasure. If Shadow minded, he didn't show it as he continued to lap at Vio, bobbing
like
his head in time to an inaudible beat. What is with them and keeping a beat? Is he musically inclined?
Da 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 da.
That would
doing
work.
the beat to that song.
Vio moaned and pulled uselessly at the restraints as Shadow continued to suck and swallow around his dick. He couldn't concentrate on anything other than the feeling of his lover's mouth on the most sensitive part of his body. Shadow pulled back and swiped his tongue from base to tip and back down again before taking it back into his mouth, and far as he could managed. I don't know.
This is when the THC is really kicking in for the author, I'm
He
thinking.
hummed, the vibrations making Vio shiver. Yeah.
Oh god, I hope someone does that in my lifetime.
It's your line.
Is
No,
it?
it's mine, sorry.
Yeah.
Shadow, please fuck me. I need to feel you inside me. I'm not going to last much longer. He ended his sentence with a breathy laugh. Accentuated with another moan. Shadow gave one last hard suck before removing his mouth from Vio's dick, wiping excess saliva on the back of his hand.
Saliva's gross.
Vio gazed at his lover through half-lidded eyes and smiled the same crooked smile. Crooked smile, again.
Name dropping.
Shadows drew Vio close and kissed him slowly, lips brushing against each other in silent I love yous.
I love you.
Vio could taste himself on Shadow's tongue, and it only served to turn him on even further.
I mean, I guess.
Shadow pulled away once more and leaned back over to the nightstand. He sifted through the open drawer and returned with a half-empty bottle of lube, strawberry-flavored.
Oh my god! My throat can't make noises like that. It hurts.
Now, the question is, are they using this strawberry-flavored lube for anal sex?
Probably.
Just safety thing. Don't use flavored lube for anything other than, blowjobs.
Really?
Unless it says specifically that it's safe for, vaginal sex.
Huh.
Because some, sugars sometimes are in there, and that is bad.
You'll get an infection.
Yes.
Bitch, you gotta be real
Just
raunchy.
PSA.
No, that's actually a really, also...
Informative. Some people just don't know this.
Use, water-based shit.
With condoms.
Yeah, otherwise it can dissolve the latex. This is also a sex ed show, apparently. This is you.
Yes.
Sorry.
The cap made a clean snap as Shadow opened it and poured the cold, viscous liquid over his fingers. He coated them generously and used his forearm to close the lid before lying it carefully next to him. He needed again in a few minutes. Good. Lube is very important.
This author is understands sex the most out of all the people we've read
maybe the
lately.
flavored lube thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just pretend that it's safe. They probably already know that it's safe.
Maybe they have their own. They probably already have their own strawberry lube, and they just looked over and they're like, "Yeah, lube."
Vio used his heels to prop himself up in Shadow's lap to give him better access. Shadow grabbed Vio's dick again and began pumping it slowly while rubbing at his entrance, coating it with the extra lube from his fingers.
If this is the dick coming towards my face, it'd be like a anatomy.
Vio forced himself to relax as he felt Shadow press his index and middle fingers inside him, not stopping until they were in as far as he could manage.
So, 3 inches?
Yeah.
Right?
He stilled his hand, letting Vio adjust to the foreign feeling of having Shadow's fingers in his ass, his other hand still continuing to pump him slowly. Vio looked up at Shadow and gave him a reassuring nod. God, this person's consent. It's good. This is what sex should be like, not any of the other stuff we read on this.
If you're imitating Red and Green from A Sad Secret, don't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Where was I, though?
Meeting his lips.
Meeting his lips, Shadow slowly withdrew his fingers before thrusting them back in, starting up an even pace. This person's pace. Shadow's just good at keeping a beat, I guess.
Maybe Shadow's like a musician.
Vio squirmed at the feeling. It wasn't exactly pleasurable to be stretched by Shadow's fingers, but it didn't feel bad either. They hadn't had sex in over a week due to conflicting schedules, so his body was craving more than what Shadow's hands alone could provide, though he greatly appreciated this care. Sometimes, when they were being particularly rough, they'd skip the prep, and though great in the moment, he'd be in pain for days.
That just sounds
He's a masochist.
I know, but that just sounds awful. The butt is it's a small entrance, and some dicks are
still
pretty
use
big.
Lube, but just be kind of like that.
But the butthole is still small.
Steady pressure.
No, I'm just thinking.
Yeah,
it's like, and if Shadow's a fanfiction character, which he is, he's probably got a massive penis, probably the size of our fucking microphone.
Oh, no.
Which is bigger than this around.
Shadow pulled his fingers out of Vio and replaced it, this time pressing 3 into him. Vio sucked in a breath, clenching around his fingers.
Sorry.
Shadow deliberately stilled his hand before curling his fingers and firmly rubbed at his prostate. Vio gasped and grasped at the headboard as Shadow began to caress and tease him. Shadow timed his thrust with the hand on Vio's dick, which was now running like a fountain.
Sorry.
Fuck, Shadow.
I didn't expect that.
I can't hold on much longer. Vio panted, each breath paired with an airy moan.
Yeah, shit, Shadow murmured. Come for me. Crying out, face buried in his arm, Vio came into his stomach. Ooh.
Yeah.
Shadow's hand siphoning him dry.
Siphoning.
Shadow removed his fingers from his ass, causing Vio to sigh from overstimulation. Sitting back onto his toes, Shadow desperately pawed at his pajama pants, freeing his length from its fabric prison.
Fabric prison.
That's what I'm gonna say every time I change at night. I'll be like, I'm freeing myself from this fabric prison. He was harder than he remembers being in a long time, and stifled a moan as he rubbed himself to the sight of Vio before him.
Wrong sight, but whatever.
His blush was burning into his cheeks, and he was covered in his own cum. He was a perfectly disheveled masterpiece. He grabbed around the bed until he found the bottle of clear lubricant they'd previously used.
Strawberry flavored. Why is it clear suddenly?
It might be clear, but strawberry flavored.
Yes.
He squirted a liberal amount onto his hands and gasped at the cold while he coated himself with it. He spread a little more on his hand and brought it to Vio's entrance, just to make sure he was comfortable. He wanted this to be good for Vio. He already came.
This is lovely.
Though. Overstimulation after you finish is not fun.
Well, for some people.
Maybe. I guess masochist, whatever. He scooted forward on his knees, grabbing Vio's thighs and lifting him slightly to get into a better position. He grabbed his dick and pressed it to Vio's ass and hesitated. Is this okay? Shadow asked, looking him in the eye. Vio smiled lazily and nodded, still riding the aftershocks of the orgasm. Shadow nodded and began to push into the tight, wet heat. Vio tensed as the head slipped in, but made no move to stop Shadow as he began to slide in inch by inch, making Shadow come beforehand.
Making Vio come beforehand.
Vio come beforehand succeeded in relaxing him, but made him oversensitive. He felt every inch of Shadow as he pressed impossibly deep inside of him, until he was positive he was going to burst. Finally, Shadow's balls were flush against Vio's ass, and he was in as far as possible. Well, I mean, if you, tuck the balls in there, I don't know, you might maybe get it to work. Thought. Vio keened as Shadow bottomed out, feeling the uncomfortable girth stretch him so intimately.
This line, though. Fuck. Oh my gods. I thought it was goddesses. You're always so much bigger than I remember you being.
Told you the size of my microphone.
Vio moaned against him. Shadow pulled him close, Vio's cum smearing across his toned stomach. He placed his hands on either side of his face and gently kissed his nose.
Hello.
He trailed kisses down the younger's cheek and found his mouth and kissed him soft and sweet, over and over. They stayed that way for a few minutes, holding each other close and enjoying the feeling of being so close to one another before Vio hooked his leg around Shadow's hip and whispered reassurances to him. Aww. Carefully, Shadow pulled out halfway and slowly rolled his hips back in place, pressing deep into Vio, causing him to gasp at the pressure. He rolled his hips again, testing the waters. Vio again struggled against the restraints, pulling and grabbing at the rope holding him taut. Shadow moaned, keeping his slow, steady thrusts in time. Why am I the only one moaning? Moan. That sounds like a cow, okay? Vio was so tight and warm. Shadow was consumed by the feeling of Vio's soft heat enveloping his dick.
Shit! Vi! You're so tight! Shadow moaned into the crook of Vio's neck.
Not a problem, I hope. Vio laughed. Shadow countered his quip with a particularly rough thrust compared to the gentle rolling thrust he'd been giving. Vio cried out, it's just one. It's like nee. Vio cried out in surprise, and bit his lip, stifling a moan, that came after. With that, Shadow began to speed up his thrusts, letting out low growls and moans. Sweat began to bead in Shadow's hair, threatening to drip down his back, more like the back of his neck than his hair. The base of his hair, I guess? No. At his scalp. I don't know. He nipped and bit at the already bruised skin. Vio whined. As Shadow's pace began to speed up again, the slapping of damp skin beginning to echo through the room.
I'm not a fan.
Vio had a tight grip on the headboard. It was the only thing he could do with his hands tied like that. He was at the complete mercy of his lover's touch, and he had not been disappointed. Vio loved the feeling of Shadow being inside him, spreading him open and leaving him exposed. He felt so close to him when they made love, and he knew that he was the only person who existed to Shadow during these times. Vio could barely think about anything other than the thick length pushing in and out of him at a bruising pace.
I feel like bruising is a word you want to use, you know? Like, do you want your pooper to be bruised? Because, like, what if you have to poop and, like, it's bruised? Just a thought.
Shadow was back sitting on his legs, gripping Vio's legs and using them as props to make sure he rubbed gently isn't in there at all. Rubbed against Vio's prostate with every thrust. Vio was squirming and writhing in his grasp, not able to stay still with all the sensations overwhelming him. Every thrust was making him see stars and knock the breath out of him. He felt empty when Shadow thrust out and too full when he thrust back in. The burn he'd initially felt of Shadow's dick stretching him out had faded into a pleasant numbness. Shadow had set a near brutal pace.
Oh my god.
Near.
Slay.
He slammed in and out of Vio as hard as he was able, making Vio bounce in his lap. His hands were still gripping the headboard, knuckles turning white. The room was filled with the sounds of slapping skin and the constant string of moans, whines, pants, and swears from the blonde. Shit. Shadow moaned. He was nearing his end. This pace wasn't meant for longevity.
Damn, you like that? Shit, I'm close. Shadow's hands gripped Vio's waist so tightly Vio knew it was going to bruise, but all he wanted was for Shadow to hold him tighter.
Fuck, me too. Touch me, please. I can't hold on anymore. Vio tossed his head into his arm and bit his lip. Shadow grasped Vio's length and pumped it in time with his harsh thrusts. All this time.
He's a music major or something. Yeah. He's good with music.
It only took a few seconds before Vio cried out and came for the second time that night. Shadow took Vio's lips with his own and kissed him hard as the other tried to catch his breath. Vio cried out as Shadow's thrusts became erratic before he gave 4 hard thrusts. Vio moaned at the sensation of Shadow's hot, wet seed.
I hate when it's called seed. It's so gross.
Shadow carefully pulled out and collapsed next to him. He gathered Vio in his arms and nuzzled into his hair, breathing in his scent. They stayed like that for a few moments before Vio's voice broke the silence. Are you gonna untie me?
I think I should just keep you like this forever. Shadow yawned.
As much as I'd love that, we need to get back to our lives tomorrow.
Wow.
Vio shifted. His arms were starting to hurt from being stuck in the same position for so long. Shadow glumly agreed and undid the rope. He tossed it onto the floor and gathered Vio into his arms, holding him close.
I love you, Vi.
I love you too. Kudos that tank.
Can I do it anonymously?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, dang.
That's pretty nice. What else? Oh, we're on RKRM.
This dude is such a good writer for never writing porn and doing it high.
Yeah, I mean,
there's some parts where it's like word choice, but that's like a personal opinion, and that's not really effective.
Wow, that was really good.
Like, we didn't like skim this or anything before it. I mean, we did look.
Looked to just like
at the
see.
We stopped in the middle and read like 2 lines and like, okay, this sounds like it'll work.
Yeah, because we usually do that just to make sure we can like get something out of it. Unless it's a super long fic, in which case we're just like, well, we'll just go as we go.
Wing it. But
oh, dang, that was good. That was good. Kudos to you, James P. Sullivan. Is it James?
Yes.
Is it you?
It's my phone, yeah.
Okay.
It is James.
James P. Sullivan. Crooked Smiles. I'm gonna give this one 5
out of 5.
5
swords.
I'm gonna give it 5
swords.
I'm gonna give 5 light bondages. I'm gonna look at their tags.
Come on, 5 swords.
That can be yours.
Okay, sure. That was nice.
It was nice. One day I'll be good at editing.
So refreshing with all like the consent.
Oh, it was so nice, and it was also just a nice change of pace from Clockwork. I didn't like use the lower register of my voice, so my throat feels good.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons we decided to take a break on
like,
the voice.
Yeah, because that last session you did like 2 words and you were like, oh, my voice is already giving up.
It didn't like hurt, but I just couldn't make the sound.
Ah, man. But yeah, if you want to read this fic, check it out. It's Crooked Smiles by James_P_Sullivan on Archive of Our Own. It's pretty cool. You can read it for yourself, even though we sort of read it to you. But I don't know.
How many hits is it? Only 311 hits total.
We need to bring that up.
13 kudos. Hey, 13.
It was a good.
Yeah,
Anywho, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be returning to Clockwork next week, as is usually how this works, because we want to get through Clockwork eventually, one of these days. But yes,
3 or 4 weeks.
thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked the video, be sure to like. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because we have awesome new content coming out every week. And yeah, like our social medias, it'll be down below. And leave a fanfiction down below, because we will read your suggestions, because why not? What else do we have to do with our lives, right? Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, stay awesome, read more smut.
That we finally got back to?
Yes, we're back to our roots.
For once.
I'll do like an awkward jazz hand, because musical theater is a thing.